All right, so then I am going to go ahead and share my screen again. We are going to go through the reports training. There was a document that was sent out this morning. It was a document of the training that we're going to be going through. I am not going to show that on the screen. I'm actually going to be in the application, but you can go ahead and follow along with that documentation. There was also a second document that once we get to some of the parameters and things like that, that we will go ahead and go over that document as well. Okay, so I tried to plan this in progression of how you would actually use the tools of creating reports. One of the things that I like to do, or what I like to do to use, is I've never ever been into the report creator. Okay, for as many times as I've created reports and helped districts work with reports and things, I always steal from somebody else. So the easiest thing to remember is if there's an SSDT report that is out there and you say, oh, I think I want to use that report, but I want it to do this, this, and this, then you take that report and you copy it and then you make your changes. Or if you want that BUD-SUM report, but I don't want to put just one fund in, I want to put a range of funds and different things like that. So I'm going to be actually going through all those steps. The more detailed part of the report is actually getting into the custom report creator, starting fresh, and we will not be going over any of that information today. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to go over is using the filters for the reports. Okay, up here on the utilities and account filters. Normally, when you think of account filters and when you're thinking of account filters from Classic, the account filters was a tool that was used to say, okay, this person has access to these accounts when they run reports or when they post requisitions, or they don't have access to these reports. So that's what the account filters are. And that's how, when you think of account filters, you're thinking of Classic, and that's why it gets so confusing, because we say, well, you can go into account filters for reports. Well, the account filters for reports are actually, when you're running, if you can think about in Classic, when you're running a report, let's say the BUD-SUM, and you go to that second page of the BUD-SUM where you can say include this account or exclude this range of accounts. Those are actually account filters that you can create in Redesign to do the same types of things. So when you're doing your save and recalls also, that you do the save and recalls in Classic to save those account filters under different things. So there's also a way in Redesign to keep those save and recalls once you have the filter set up. So we're going to go ahead and set up a filter. Okay. And in this demo, there's already quite a few filters. Now, these might be filters for people that they might have people's names on them. In your case, or they might have something to do with actually doing requisitions and things. We're not going to touch any of those, and we're going to leave all those alone. But we're going to actually set up an account filter here for using reports. Okay, so I'm going to go into create, and then this blank screen comes up, and then you can give it any kind of name. So it could be high school athletics, or it could be middle school library, or anything, any name on the report filter that you want to use. Okay. Now in Classic, when you did the save and recall, it was save and recall to that specific report. So if you had to wanted to run a BUD-SUM, you had to create an account, save and recall in BUD-SUM. And then you wanted to run a REV-SUM, then you had to do the same save and recall in REV-SUM and name it in there. In Redesign, you can actually create one filter for all reports. So if you are setting up, let's say like FISCWeb, you had reports going to your high school athletics office, and you had a budget report, a revenue report, a cash summary, a PO report. They're all different types of reports, but they all use the same ranges of accounts, and they all use the same information. Then we could set up one filter here for high school athletics that we're going to use for all different kinds of reports. Okay. So once I give it a name, I'm going to click on this plus down here at the bottom, and I'm going to add my filters. Now, one of the things that you need to think about when you're putting in the filters, if you have a filter that you want to exclude anything from, okay, you do not want to include 100 object codes or 200 object codes. You always have to put in anything that you're excluding at the top. So the very first one is going to be your excludes. And then after you do your excludes, then the next thing you're going to be doing is adding the most complicated ranges. Okay, so like if you have something that you're going to have ranges in, you want to do a range of objects. You want to include or exclude this range of objects, and then exclude another range of objects, but include something else. You put the most complicated ones first. So the excluded ones are going to go first, and then the most complicated lines are going to go next, and then the simple lines are going to go last. Okay. Now, a little bit about this TI. In your document, in the documentation, I think it's on the bottom of page 2. I kind of explained what the TI is. It's a transaction indicator. And the transaction indicator, when you were on Classic, you didn't have to know what that was when you set up filters. Okay. You had to, if you were in a BUD-SUM, it knew you were going to be running that report for budget or expense accounts. So that's what a TI of 02. If you were in a cash summary, it knew that you were running a cash summary report, so it was going to do your cash accounts. Redesign, since we're going to set this up for multiple different types of accounts, you have to put in the TI. If I put in an 02 here, that means that this filter will only be used for expense reports. If I try to run it on a cash report, or if I try to run it on a revenue report, you will not get a report. It'll come up and say no, nothing found, because it doesn't have budget information on it, budget accounts. If I put in a cash account of 00, that means I'm going to have this access for all dimensions: cash, budget, appropriation, revenue. Okay. So the first one I'm going to put in here is actually I'm going to exclude. So I'm going to exclude general fund, object. It's going to be a range. So I'm going to put a 444 and then a dot dot, because that's what the range is in redesign, through 45445. Okay. Now, because I want it excluded, I'm not marking any of these boxes over on the right-hand side. That's all I'm going to put on that. So then my second one I'm going to add is another exclude. And this is in the documentation on page 1, still on page 1. I'm going to exclude another range of 001. And I don't want to see any objects of 447 through 453. Okay. Oops, 2 dots. So again, it's an exclude, so I'm not going to mark any of these boxes over here. And then the last exclude that I'm going to do, I just want to exclude one specific account. So again, I'm going to do general fund, object 441. Okay. So I'm excluding all these object codes in my report. So when I run reports, none of these objects are going to be on the report. So then the next thing I'm going to be adding is, again, I'm going to do a 00, and this one's going to be another range. And this one I want to have all the accounts from 400 through 999 with an OPU of 052. Okay, so my range is going to go 001. And then my object is 4. Now I want all 400s because these are already excluded. It's going to hit these first. And so then the rest of the 400s I want to include. Now in Classic, the range or a wild card was an asterisk. In redesign, it's a percent sign. So I want to include all 400s through, and then I'm going to put 9s. Okay. And then I want OPU of 052. And then I want to click on the R, which if you hover over it, it means read. And that means I'm going to give access to reading or creating reports through this. Okay. So then the last one I'm going to do, now what I mentioned before, the most complicated are first and then the easy ones last. So these ranges are more complicated than just one object code. So these are all my excludes, and then these are my includes. So I'm going to include, 001, and I want to, excuse me, my example was 009. 052. So I want everything in that fund to be included on the reports. Okay. So these can be as complicated as you want to get them or as simple as you want them to be. You can actually create one, and then I'll show you how you can actually clone it. Let's say this is the same thing I want for this high school office, but or the middle school, but the OPU is different. So I've created this for the high school so I can save it, and then I can clone it to the middle school and just come in here and change the OPU to the middle school. So there's a way to actually clone these or make a copy of them also, so you don't have to go back and create them all. One of the other things that you can do on these is if you were a heavy fiscal web user and you had a lot of save and recall reports, it's recommended that you go back into Classic and go to your save and recalls and do a print screen. So you pull up that save and recall report for your BudSum that's going to the principal at the high school, and you see how that is done. You print that out. Then you come over into Classic and you create the same filter then for the high school principals. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay. Then once I've saved it, you can see a little bit better here of actually what the filter looks like. So 444 through 445, the dots meaning it's a range, and then the percent signs is the wildcard. Here's the clone feature.
Can you explain one more time why we use the 00 TI and all those?
Okay. So the TI means is the transaction indicator. Right. And when you were in Classic, when you ran a BudSum, you just created that save and recall for BudSum. And it knew, because it was a BudSum report, that it was going to be for an expense account.
Right.
In Redesign, I can set up filters not specific to a report, but to a body or an object. So I'm going to use this filter for the high school for revenue accounts, for revenue reports, a PO report, a cash report, a budget report, any types of reports. If I did not have this as a 00, let's say I had it as a 02 for an expense report, when I would go to run a cash report, I would get 0. I would get nothing on the cash report because it's saying this filter is set up to run for expense accounts only if I had 02s here in here.
Okay, but 00 doesn't mean cash account only.
It does. That's correct. It kind of filters down. So like 00 is the top. It's like the highest. If you look at when you look at your accounts, when you're setting up a new account, you always set up the cash account first. Then you have to set up the budget accounts. Then you have to set up the appropriate or the revenue accounts. So if you have access to setting up a 00 or a cash account, then it's going to filter down to everything that's underneath it.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Now, in addition to that, even though I say that it's a 00 and it will allow me to run it for a budget account, I can still use this to run it for the cash account. I mean, if it's just for running cash accounts, I can do that.
Sharon,
okay.
Can you explain the access markings again? I know you don't mark anything if you want to exclude, but you only mark the R when the ones you're including. What do the other symbols mean?
So the other ones is to create, and the other ones basically have to do with more features of the redesign system than the reports. For report only, for the filters for reports, you're only always going to do the R. But the C is for create. Basically, that allows a user, you would just mark that to allow a user to have the capabilities of creating budget accounts within this range. Okay. And a U is update, meaning they can update a budget account. A D is to delete, so they have the options or the capability to delete accounts in this range.
But that doesn't apply to the report writer, right?
That's correct. That's
The
correct.
only thing that applies to this report filter is if you mark the R, it's included. If you don't mark the R, it's excluded.
That's correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
so in this, we won't use anything but the R.
Right, that's correct. So using those other boxes that are over here on the right-hand side would be if you're creating a filter for a user to do requisitions, or you're using creating a filter for something else other than requisitions. Let's say you have another user that you want to have the ability to have only access to certain accounts. So then you would use these other boxes to check mark them. And I'm checking my documentation. I think, no, I didn't. I left that out. I left out what those other boxes were. Only
in
because
theory-
we're going to be using them for reports.
In theory, Sharon, right, if they had a user filter, they really could save themselves some time, go into the user filter, clone it, and just tweak it out for a report then. Because most of the accounts that the user's going to see is already going to be there. They would just change the flags on the right-hand side and maybe tweak a couple exclusions for them. So they could have a dual purpose.
Right, right.
Well, I was trained to always put R and P. That's what Heidi said. This is Rodney.
I missed what he said.
We were
Using
trained
R
to
and P.
always mark R and P. Is P for print?
No, P is for pre-encumbrance.
Okay.
So it would be like a future requisition or future PO. Okay, great questions. All right, so this is the clone feature. Then I can change this to middle school if I wanted to. And then come in here, and I'm really not quite sure what another OPU is, but I can go 5.1, let's say the middle school. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to show you here when I'm creating this filter, like I said, I'm not quite sure I have an 051 OPU or not. This does not go in and check to see if you have accounts that are active that are valid. The filter can be created with anything on it that you want, whether you have those accounts or not. Okay. So if you type something wrong in here and then you go to run your report and you're not getting a report, the first thing you want to do is go back and check your filters. Make sure your filters are okay. Okay. One of the other things that you can do, like sometimes when you're on that filter screen, it does get kind of, it actually shows a lot of information. So your columns could be broken a little bit. So if you hover over this and just click on from the grid, it opens up the highlight view over on the right-hand side, and it's going to show you exactly what those filters are. So the asterisk means that for everything. Okay. Now you notice that when I said in redesign, the wild card is the percent sign. That's what you use when you're entering it. But when you look at it, it's an asterisk. Okay. Okay, so this is where you're going to spend a lot of your time when you're getting your reports and you're thinking about how you want to set these up for bundles. One of the things that in the bundles that we'll go over later is using the account filters in your reports for the bundles. So once your filters are set up, that's basically all you need to do then is go and set up the filter or set up the bundle with these filters added to the reports. Okay. All right, so that would be your step one. So then the next thing, part part of what I want to go over is how do you create simple reports from the grid? And like I said before, I like to do things that I like to take from something else. So I'm not smart enough to sit down and say and create this report from scratch, but I'm smart enough to know what I want to see on this grid. Then once I see the information on this grid that I want, then I can create a report, or I can save the report. And once the report is saved, then I can go to the report manager and make my changes. Okay. So for example, we're in the vendor screen now. Okay. And these are all vendors. And what I did here is I took away a lot of the columns that you may be seeing on your vendor screen. And I only have the active, the type 1099, and the year-to-date totals. And I did that by going into more. And I think Casey went over this in the beginning reports training. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how you actually go in here and you can just check the columns that you want to see and how you get the different columns and things like that. You can also move your columns around. Now, when you're going in here to use this for reports, you got to think about it. Well, I'm looking at a report right here on the screen. So this is what the report's going to look like. Do I like the columns the way they are? Okay. Well, no, let's move this column over here. And let's move the name over to the first position. So whatever your report is going to look like is what your grid looks like. Okay. So now the other thing with report writing that is always confusing is how do I filter? You know, when you get to the report writing part of this, it's like there's a big long parameter thing. There's different filters and things like that. Well, put the filter in the grid first, because once you put the filter in the grid and you save the reports, those filters are going to stay there. So the first thing I want to say, I only want to see active vendors. And then I only want to, I gotta look at my notes here, make sure I get the right things here. Okay. And then we're going to do fiscal year to date. Well, actually year to date is greater than or equal to 600. So this will filter out the vendor grid and just show me those vendors that have made or we have paid over or 600 or over in this calendar year. And then we're also going to say not equal to 1099s. All right. So I can also do not equal to is, I think the value, another value is .NE is not equal to instead of the brackets here. And if you look at the bottom of page 3 and top of page 4, I put in the documentation what some of the values that you can use up here at the top. Okay. So once I have my grid, the way that I want the report ran, I can go ahead and click on this report. So the report is going to generate, and I can just go down here and generate it, and it's going to create the report. Well, actually, let's do one more thing here. Let's sort this by vendor name. So if we're going to sort this by vendor name, then I just click on the primary name, and that creates a little up caret here. So that means that now it's sorted. If I click on that again, then it's in descending order. If I want to sort two different columns, let's say if I want to sort it by vendor name first, and then by year-to-date totals, if I hold down the control key, some of these fields you can't total on or sort on, and I'm not quite sure why it's that way. Let me find one. Here we go. Okay. All right. So I'm sorting on primary name. And then there's a second sort that I want to do. I can hold down my control key and click on that name again. What the heck? There it goes. Sorry, it's a shift key. It's holding the wrong key. So now you see that there's a number 1 up here and a number 2. So that means that it's sorting by the name first and then by the type second. Okay. So now we have different sorts in our report. So then if I click on the report to create this, if I go to the sort options it's going to have those two sorts in here. Okay, so this is how you get your sorts created on the reports page, is click on the columns that you want to sort by, and then you can, then you'll see the sorts. Okay, now if this is a one-time report, I'm only going to run it one time, I can just go ahead and generate it and forget about it. But let's say this is a report that I want to keep, and I'm going to go in and make changes to this, and I want to run it often, maybe once a month. Okay, maybe this is included in your principals report or something like that, this principal bundles that you're going to create. So,
Sharon,
yes.
can I interrupt for just a moment? I'm so sorry. We've had a request to take a pause long enough that people can print out the document that they received this morning.
Oh, so sorry.
No,
Okay.
no, you're good. You're good. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were on a roll. So if you have not printed that document out, if we're going to take just a couple minutes here, if you could gather that up as to not to delay the process, we'd appreciate that. We'll start back up here in just a couple minutes. Again, you all would have received that email from Fiscal Communications this morning. Let me confirm what time you guys got that.
Sharon, I've got a question about the sortable properties. When you're on this page,
Mhm.
it's got the year-to-date total as sortable. Now, you couldn't do that on the grid. So how do I add that to this?
Okay. So basically this was in the beginning training, and Casey went over this, so I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on it, but since we're taking a break here, I'll show you how you can do this. Any of the fields that are in this grid behind us and that are going to show on here are going to be over here as sortable properties. If you want to sort by the year to date, I can go ahead and click on this field, and I'm going to drag it over here to the right side. Okay. Now, it's going to sort in this order then. It's going to sort by name, type, and then year to date. But let's say I want this year to date to be up here at the top. You notice when I try and click and drag it up, it doesn't allow me to do that. So what we have found the easy way to do is to click on these other ones and move them over here. So year to date is at the top, and then bring these two back over. Okay, so that is basically the only way to do that. Sometimes I found when I was working on this last couple of days that sometimes if you bring it over, you can drop it in the middle. But some of the fields, and I'm not quite sure why, some of the fields won't allow you to do that. Okay. So it's just a click and drag. And then if, let's say you want a control break, let's say if you were doing a report for budget information and you want to have a total when the OPU changes or something like that, that's what a control break would do. So this isn't going to make sense because it's going to put a total or a control break after that, but that's what the control break will do. And we'll go into this a little bit later once we get to the report manager. Some of these control breaks and page breaks and things like that will be in there also.
Okay, then while we're still on kind of the break, you know, when you go into, it's the report options, and then it tells you that you can do the PDF and all those different ones, right?
Yes.
Is there any way, because I believe, and maybe this is just me, but I believe that probably the top two used would be the PDF and the Excel spreadsheet one.
Right.
So
Just down here, which you have to know to click on that.
right. But is there any way you can put that on the first page? So every time I don't have to filter.
That's actually on one of the things that we've asked to the SSDT to change, is to make this window big enough to have all of them on one screen.
Yeah, and even if they're not all there, just put the most used ones towards the top, because otherwise number one, I'm not sure what order they're in now anyway.
Right. I think they're in the order the SSDT created them, honestly. So I'm not quite sure why they can't rearrange these by just flipping them around right now. But like I said, it is on the roadmap to actually get that to change. So it's either have the ones that are used more at the top, or to have all of them on one page.
And then when you're on the grid and you can't sort by that, you know, like you couldn't sort by the dollar amount, is there
Right.
any way to make those sortable besides going into the report writer? I read a lot of reports by OPU, and a lot of times I just want to look at them. I don't want to go through, you know, the whole actually processing the report. I just want to sort it by OPU. And
Yeah.
OPU, oddly enough, isn't one that it sorts by.
Right. I'm not sure of that. I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, team, I think that that's another thing, that to make the fields at the top, all of them sortable. I don't know if it's actually something that is going to be put out there anytime soon.
Sharon, I'll go ahead and put in that enhancement request. I've made notes here as we've gone. And I did want to let you know that we're good to proceed, but I'll go ahead and add that enhancement one to either put them in alphabetical order. When you get to most frequently used, that becomes very relative as to who you're talking to and who's doing what.
Right.
So, but at least in alphabetical, at least where we can see them all, so they're easier to find, that definitely would be an enhancement here. And then I will also add in the opportunity that if we are going to do reports from the grid, that whatever fields we bring in then become sortable properties. So I'll add both of that to the enhancement request.
Thank you, Heidi.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this report then here is a vendor report for 1099. So I'm going to name this 1099 non. Let's do a non 1099 report. Okay, so now I'm going to save the report. And once I click on this save, then the little box is going to come up here and tell me that the report's been saved. At this point, basically nothing's been done here with my grid. I can go ahead and reset this. I can get rid of my filters, and everything for the vendor grid is back to the same way. Okay. But now, since we have that report out there, it is on our report manager. It's actually automatically put on our home page also. So if I go back to home, I'm going to see my I thought I would. There it is down at the bottom. A non-1099 report. Okay. So what I'm going to do then here is go to the report manager. Okay. So once I have that report created, I can go to the report manager, and then we're going to see that report out here. These reports, then you'll see who created the reports in your list. You're going to see the report name and then a description. Any of these that are created by the SSDT, you'll notice that you cannot delete, but we can make changes to them. So we can copy them and make changes to them. Any of the ones that are created by you will be able to be deleted. You can come in here, delete it if you want to. If you said, oh, that's not anything that I actually want to do anymore, so I can get rid of the report. You can also share this report. Okay, there's a couple of ways to share reports with users. The redesign applications, each person has their own username and login. So whatever you do in your username and login for the reports is what you see. One of the things I forgot to mention about the filters, though, if you create a filter that's out there, anybody that has access to the filter screen, they're going to see that filter also, and they're going to be able to use. Am I saying that wrong? No, they'll be able to see that filter, and they'll be able to use that filter as well once they are created. It's the bundles that you can't see. Okay, so again, this is all these information things over here on the left-hand side we're going over at the beginning one, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it going over them. I'm just going to mention how kind of a little bit here. But if you wanted to share this report, let's say you created a report and you and one of your other treasurers in the county, you were talking about it and you said, oh, I have this report that does this and this. And they said, oh, I'd like to have that. You can download this report and it creates a JSON file. And then you can email that to anybody that you want. Then once they receive that email, then they can import it. Okay, so that's importing that report definition. So that's one way to share reports. This is the one that we're going to go into next, the eyeball. And basically it's letting us open up that definition and look at the detail of that report. We can edit the name and the description, which are these fields over here on the right. I mentioned before we can delete it. We can also download the report definition. And then this one here is, you'll see on the reports that you have created. If you have access to this, I think there's a special, is there a special access, Heidi, that they have to have for this? Okay, I didn't think so. So if you've created the report, you can actually share the report definition with specific roles. So instead of actually saying, I want everybody in my treasurer's office to be able to run this report that I've created, you can come in here and say, oh, they all have USAS standard access. They have full USAS standard access. So I'm going to share it with anybody that has USAS standard access. So it's automatically going to go on their report manager. So they will be able to access that report.
Sharon, can I stop you for a minute?
Yes.
When you do that, are you also sharing the saved reports within that report?
No, you are
Meaning-
not.
Okay. If
You are saving,
download it,
you're sharing the report definition itself, not your save and recalls.
what if you did it the other way, the way you said to download it and email it to someone, then does it save it?
No, that does the same thing. It's giving you the access to the report definition, not anything of save and recalls.
Can we
Any
ask
save and
that
any
be-
save and recalls that you do within the report are user defined and saved with your application only.
Can we ask that be changed?
We can. I don't know if it's possible, but we can always check.
So,
Reason being is I have all these reports that I have set up for report bundles at the end of the month that automatically send out to everyone. And I want my assistant to have the same ability. Like when an instructor asks for a report, she can go in and it's saved. I've already set it up for her.
That's one of the things when we get to the report bundles that I'm going to go over. We found a way that we can actually like create a report user. And then you can go in and that user will have access to just creating report bundles and creating reports and set all your reports that go under report bundles under this other username. And then whoever you want to have access to get in and make changes to that can have access to that, that user and make those changes.
Thank you.
Rodney,
welcome.
we've learned a lot from the early waves, so we're trying to get past those hiccups and the giddy up with that. So
Okay, so I'm going to share this with anybody that has USAS standard, but that's a way to do that. Okay, so all the meat and potatoes on Report Writer is actually underneath this eyeball. Okay, so once I go into the eyeball, this is actually the report that I created. All right, so it's going to have all the fields that were on my grid. It's going to have all the sorting that was on the grid. And then under the configuration, it's going to have all my filters that were on the grid. Okay. And I'm going through this pretty quickly just to show you that this is what is here, but we're going to go back and make some changes then to show you how you can modify this. All right. So I can change anything on here. I can resort this. I can do anything that I want on this report. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to the report manager. And I'm going to pull up an SSDT report, this budget summary report, let's say. Well, let's do a cash. Cash might be smaller. This cash summary. Okay. One of the things about the cash summary report or any SSDT report is the first time I make any kind of change in here and I save this report, it's going to save it using this same name, but it's going to have my name as the owner. Okay. So if you ever have an SSDT report that you say, oh, this is kind of what I want to do, but I want to make some changes to it. So let's start here at the beginning with this report. Then I'm going to go ahead and name it something different. So the very first thing I'm going to do when I come in here is I'm going to name it something else, and then I'm going to save it. So that way it is now on my report manager under my name with a different name than the SSDT's report. Because once you start going in here and you start making changes to those, if you didn't realize that's what's happening, when you go back to the report manager, you're going to see a whole bunch of reports down here that are going to have SSDT cash summary report, SSDT cash summary, SSDT cash summary. So every time you go in there to the SSDT's report and make a change and save it, if you don't change the name, it's going to keep the name the same, but it's going to have 3 or 4 different people that's going to have the owners. So that's a way that you're going to get very confused by having a lot of different reports out there. Okay, what does this report do? Or what does this report do? Because you're not changing the names. So that's the very first thing that you want to do when you're bringing in an SSDT report or anybody else's report, for that matter of fact. You want to make sure that you are going through here and making changes and change that name before and save it. The other thing is when you're using the save from an SSDT template is once you make a change to it, as soon as you make that change, save it. Okay, so if I make a bunch of changes over here to the properties fields, and the first thing I'm going to do is generate it to see if that's the fields that I want. And if it's the fields that I want, even though I haven't gone into doing any sorts of configurations or anything, I just have the fields that I want, then save the report. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is this first tab, and this is the main screen of the report writer. And we've got all these properties over here on the left-hand side. And granted, it's a bunch of fields, a lot of fields. And if you don't know where you're at, or if you open up a lot of different of these carrots and you're opening up all these fields, it's just going to keep going and going and going. But one of the things that I want to mention to you is there's a lot of fields that are named the same thing, but they're under different fields. So I'm going to go ahead and close this again. So we've got budget here. If I open budgets, then I have accounts. Okay, well, we're in a cash summary account, so that doesn't really make sense that I'm going to be pulling in budget accounts. So I'm not even going to open up that code. Okay, I have account history up here. This one makes more sense because it's specific to the cash accounts. This is the account number, beginning balances, fiscal periods, and things like that. If I go down here a little bit further past the budgets, then I have codes. I have fund and special costs. So if I hover over here, this is a code, fund code, okay? If I come up here and I have the account here and go to the code, this is a different one. This says it's the account history account code, okay? So what I like to do, because this can be very confusing over here, and without having anything that's in writing or from the SSDT to say, okay, we need to know what all these fields are. This is from the SSDT, so we know this is the fund and special costs. I always hover over this field to see what the code is. So this is telling me, okay, this is the fund code screen. So it's not this one up here. It's this one that's down at the bottom. Okay, so I find out what the code is here first, and then I go over here and then, okay, so it's under this code, this fund and special costs. That's what these two are. Month to date, fiscal year to date, month to date, expended, received, things like that. Those are pretty self-explanatory. And I think those are actually down here. They're not even inside another carrot. They're all in their own fields, let's say. Okay. Another thing is that what you can do, and this will take some time depending on all the fields that you have, you can actually do a search. Okay, so if I knew that, let's say if I wanted to search for a specific field, I can open up all these carrots first. Oops. Like I said, once you open up one, you're going to open it, it's going to keep on going. So let's say if I had these all open and I wanted to search for fiscal year to date received, let's say, if I'm in this window and if I do a control F, fiscal year to date, oops. Okay, so now you see that it up here in the top, it's got 16 occurrences of fiscal year to date, and they're all highlighted over here in my fields. These two are also highlighted, so it found these two also. But then I can say, okay, is that the one I want? No, I don't want the percent received, but I want fiscal year to date received. So that's what I can pull it over then. But you notice one of the things I just said that you didn't want to do. If I hover over this, it's anticipated revenues from the account. And then if I come down here at this one, fiscal year to date received, is actually the same field. So that's where it can get kind of confusing. And the other thing is when I'm adding fields and things like that, I just pull over a field, run the report. If it doesn't look right, then I know it's not the right field. There isn't anything that says that you can't just keep pulling fields over. No, that's not what I want. Pull field over. No, that's not it. And you just keep working with that and you just keep generating the report and seeing if it fits. Okay.
Can you show where you found the search thing? I spend an awful lot of time hunting through.
I just did a control F.
Control F. Okay, so it's not on the screen. It's
No.
you gotta know it. Okay.
Yeah, the control F is actually an application through the Google search. It's not in the redesign application.
All right, gotcha.
So
Okay.
when you're in the grid and you're wanting to, excuse me, and you're wanting to do a report, can you do Control F there also?
From the more box?
From the more, from the
Yes.
more, yes,
Yes.
you can. Yes, you
Okay.
can.
Thank you.
You just want to make sure if this caret is to the right, that means that it's closed. So those fields that will not search on. Okay, you have to open up all the carets first and then do your search. Or open up some of the carets and it's like, okay, I think it might be in one of these areas, but I'm not quite sure. So you do the control F, and if you don't find it, then go and open some more.
I
Okay,
think this is the most frustrating part of the entire report thing,
yes, it is.
is finding the field that I want. Even though I know the name, there might be how many?
Right, exactly. And that's why we've asked the SSDT, you know, when it comes to these field names, to give us a little bit of information, give us a little bit of help on this. Because there are a lot of things that they keep adding to these reports. So we can add the cash information, they keep adding all these fields because people are saying, well, I want the 5-year forecast fields in my budget account, or I want this and I want that. So they're adding more fields all the time, but it's making it harder for us to find them. But honestly, that's why I say use something that's out there already created with those fields. Okay, it might be a budget summary report that you see that has those columns in it, but you don't really want a budget summary, but you know what those columns are. Copy that report in and then change some field name and change some properties here. Get rid of some of the fields that are there and add more fields to it. Okay.
Hey, Sharon, now is a great time to let everyone on here know these changes can only be made if you all let us know you want them. So we love these conversations. We love to be able to do this kind of stuff. We're excited to get to do this kind of stuff again. But me sending this up today is one enhancement request. They do votes. So if you guys are in something and you see a frustration, Robert, thank you for adding yours. Joy, thank you for adding yours. Tanya, thank you for adding yours, because that all leads to those search options. You guys aren't bothering us. Send us an email. Just simply say, hey, could they add this? Can you add this for enhancement request? And every time we get that, we can send that up to the SSDT, and that adds votes and moves that to the top of the stack to get addressed. So just, this was a great time to add that, Sharon. Sorry for the interruption, but thank
That's
you.
okay. Thank you. Okay, so then let's get back to this grid over here. So these are all the columns that are going to be in our report. So if you're thinking about your report, it starts from the left to the right. So the first column is going to be the account code, then the description, then the initial cash, and so on and so forth. All right, this is a report that I pulled in from the SSDT, but let's say there's a bunch of stuff on here I don't want. Okay, I don't want, this is a cash account. I don't want to see the unencumbered balance. So I'm just going to delete that field over here on the right. So just delete that field. Okay. I don't want to see, let's say for some reason, I don't want to see encumbrances. So I can delete that field. It's like, oh, I deleted the wrong thing. Then you can go over here, because once you delete it, it's putting it back over in this list. I will have to find it in this list, but I can do a Control F and find the encumbrance and then bring it back over. You bring it back over two different ways. You can double click on the field, or you can click and drag it. Okay. All right, so that's basically setting up your report then. Then this middle column here is the sort priorities. So this is basically how on the grid I was sorting each of the columns by different ways. Now, if you don't have anything here as being sorted at all, it's just going to come in the way it is in the files. Okay, so this one is a cash account, so I'm going to sort it. Let's say, no, let's do this. Let's sort it by fund first and then by special cost. You notice that as soon as I sort it this way, then it has ascending, which I can change it to descending if I want. Okay, these aren't available to be clicked on until I actually sort that column. All right. If I wanted to sort it by fund balance, I could. The year-to-date expended or the year-to-date received or something like that, you can sort it. All right, so in this case, for this report, I'm going to sort it by fund and special cost. Okay. Once I sort it by that way, then I have a control break. So the control break is basically that every time the fund changes, then I'm going to have a total. Every time the special cost changes, I'm going to have a total. Okay. So I'm not going to put a control break in there at first because I want to see what my report looks like. Right. So I'm just going to leave this information here just to see what it's going to look like. So I can go to the report generator and I'm going to save, and I'm just going to generate this report just as simple as it was, just to see what it looks like. Okay. Now you notice that I'm still in the properties, but I'm on this last tab over here to create my report. I didn't think it'd take this long to run that.
That's the problem with trying to report, is you might be stuck for a while. And then if you make one little change and go back and try it again, then you're wasting so much time waiting.
They shouldn't it shouldn't take that long. I know some of the bigger districts, we have some issues with running reports, and the SSDT is trying to address that. But it shouldn't take that long to run reports and things like that. But I understand the frustration of going back and forth doing that. But as you can see here then, because we have the sort by fund and then by special cost, we don't have any control breaks or anything like this. I'm basically just looking at my columns here. I'm looking to see if they're okay. I'm looking to see if there's anything I want to add or change at this point. Okay, because then once I get this done, then I'm going to make it a little bit more fancy. Okay. All right. So I was hoping, but I don't see anything. I'm going to scroll down here at the bottom. So sorry about that. Okay. One of the things that we're going to go over next is formatting this report a little bit different. And I was hoping that I'd see something, but sometimes you might see a report that has pound signs on it. Okay. Or you might see a report that has two rows. Let's say this was on the first row here, and then this might be on the second row. The received might be below it. Okay. Whenever you see those pound signs or the wrapped around reports, it's because there's not enough room in that column to create or to put that information in. Sometimes you might see wrapped fields like this field on top of this field. Normally, we don't see that unless you're running a summary report. If you're running a summary report, then you might see those overlapping fields. But more times than that, than anything is we're going to see pound signs here, or we're going to see 2 rows here, because there's not enough room on this report to put everything that you want it to be. Okay. But we are going to fix that. I got to move my bar over here. Okay. By going back here, and we're going to go back to the properties. Okay. So this column here is just adding the totals. So I'm going to get a total at the bottom of the function, or excuse me, at the month to date received, fiscal year to date, month to date expended, fiscal year to date expended, and then also the fund balance. So those are things that if this field that you pull over is numerical, then you will be able to do a function here. You can do an average, you can do a minimum, and you can do a maximum, or you can not do anything at all. Let's say I don't want to summary add them together on the initial cash. Okay, but by default, anything that's a number field is going to have these figures here. Okay. The other thing that I am going to add here is I'm going to add control breaks on the fund and function, or the function fund and special costs. Okay. So now it comes to these dots over here on the right hand side. Okay. These are going to be the extended properties for the field. Okay. Now remember when I said if you have a field that has pound signs, okay, there's too much information in that column to fit on your report. This is where you would go to fix it. Now, if you fix one column, you have to fix all the columns, okay? So once you open this up, this is going to show you what the name of the field is. This, and I think this is, let's get to the documentation on page 6, bottom of page 6. It goes through what each of these fields is. The suppressed means that you don't want that field on the report at all. Okay, let's say if we have a field on here that we're sorting by, but we don't want to show it on the report, then you can suppress the report, that field from not being on the report. This is going to come in from your sort field from back here, this column here in the background. If this was sorted by anything, then this would have a number in it. So this field down here will already have a number 1. So you can actually go to this screen and do your sorting as well. Okay. This one here, the next field here is the suppress repeating. This is good to use if you're doing control breaks. Let's say I only want the fund and the special cost to show at the top of the column. Then I want all the detail underneath it. Then I want the totals page. So I only want to see that fund and function, like on my report that I ran over on the left-hand side, it had fund and function on every single line. I can suppress my repeating there if I wanted to. Okay, so then it's not going to have repeating fund and functions on the displayed. And that doesn't really make sense because you only have one fund and function. But let's say you're doing a report for payroll and you're pulling in somebody's pay or somebody's absences or something like that, and you don't want to see their name or their social security number or their ID on each line, you can suppress repeating. So it would have the person's name at the top, then all their absences next to it. And then when it comes to the next person, then the next person's name will be there. So all that whole column will be blank. Okay. And again, the control break and the page break. This function, again, it's not going to work on your account code, but you can change it here as well as being over here on the background screen. So some of these things that are on this screen do the same thing as if it does on the first screen. Okay, now here's one thing that I like to do, because a lot of times when you're doing reports and you have that one column and it's butted up over to the left hand side of the column, the next column, it's butted up to the left side. So they're right against each other. So you can't really tell when one column starts and one column ends, but you know that's where the column is. You can move that column. Let's say if it's a name field or something like that, that we want it left justified, or we want to put it in the center of the column, or we want it right justified. Okay. then it will be to the right of the column. So that means everything will end to the right of that column. So you can move it, and just by moving it, it might make that report look a little better. Okay. I'm going to put this in the center. Okay. Then the next thing is the column titles. The column titles is going to default to the account name. You know, let me get a field here that's really makes sense here. Let's do the fund. Okay. So this is, the fund is going to be suppressed, and then our sorting and the ascending. So this all comes from the grid. So then I'm going to do it. This one all by default is going to be left justified. Well, I want the fund to be in the center. Okay. The column title is fund. Now this one is a small title, but let's say if you had a title that said month to date cash received, and it's like 5, you know, it's huge, but the detail in that column is smaller. So the column width is going to be what the header needs, not what the data in that column is. So what I could do is I can change the column header to be something else, the column D, so that's going to shorten up that column, okay, by default. The next 3 things then actually have to do with how this is going to be displayed on the report. Since this is a control break, that means that whenever the fund changes, then I'm going to get a new fund. I can put that in the header only. So it's only going to be at the top of the report. It's not going to be on each line. Or I can put it in the footer. Or I can put it in the detail of the header. And the detail would be if the property should appear in the detail header instead of the column on the report. Okay. The property should appear in the column header instead of the column one part. These two basically do the same thing. The control header and the control detail do the same thing. Okay. And then the width. If you see a field in here that's a 0 width, it's going to use as much space as needed for as big as that field can be. Okay. If we needed to change the width, we can put in 10 here. Okay. We know the fund is only 3 positions wide, but our fund name is 4. Now, one of the things that I've noticed on some of this is if I say 6 and I look at that field and I count 6 positions, it doesn't mean 6. I can't figure out what that 6 means. So this is another thing of, okay, I'm going to change it to 6 to see if that changes my column width so I can see all the detail that's in that column. If it doesn't, then I'm going to have to come in here and change it again. Okay, let's say I have to make it bigger for some reason. Okay, I am going to make it bigger just to show you what it's going to look like. Okay, so now I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go ahead and generate the report. Now, with all the things that we have been doing, I have not saved this parameter yet. I saved it at the beginning, so any changes that I have made is not saved in my report yet. Okay, so because we said that this was a detail information, our fund is up here at the top, and it's not listed again until we change the fund. Okay, make this a little bigger. And also the fund code, oh, we suppressed that. So that's not in the actual column here because it was suppressed. The one that we made 16, that didn't make sense to do that. Okay, but you see how now since I did a break or a sum, that now whenever the fund is 001, whenever the special cost change, then I have my detail here. And then I have a total of all general fund. Okay. So I'm going to go back to here and let's do the fund balance. Okay. So this one, instead of saying fund balance on the column, I'm just going to say balance. And then I'm going to make this 16 here. Actually, it might even be bigger than that. Let's make it 25. Okay, now I'm going to generate the report and see what that looks like.
Sharon, when you pull up this next report, Robert's got a question. I think we can relay it to what you're gonna pull up here in
Okay.
the chat. He's asking the difference between control, well, well, we could do control footer on here too. But from what I'm reading, and I'm with Sharon, sometimes that stuff can be very confusing. The control header is in that black bar, and the control detail is that what she just highlighted there, Robert. So the header is in the black detail up top, and then the detail header is right above the information in the body of that. And then the footer, so if she goes to the bottom, if
I
this
don't have
one
any
has a
footers.
control footer, yeah, she doesn't have a control footer on this one. So
But it would
Robert, at
be
least,
down here.
yep, that's the difference between control header and detail header. One is in the bold, one is in the body. Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, so now, and it still didn't wrap it, but you can see here now that my, instead of saying fund balance, it says balance, and that column is 25 wide. Okay, so just by making that one change, it shifted everything else to the left and made room for that to be 25. Okay, so in this case here, it really doesn't matter because I can still read the rest of the report. If I made changes to all these fields and made them all 25, then it's basically going to be so big that it's not going to fit on the report. Then we're going to have the pound signs, and then we're going to have to go back and adjust some of those column widths. Okay. Also, this one here is what when I'll have to go back. Is that one that we centered?
Why does it say Fund 001-001?
That is this account, full account code here at the top. And sometimes I don't really understand that. So let's do this. Let's get rid of that. All right. And then the other thing that we can do is we can move this. We want the fund special costs up the top. So this is a lot easier than moving them around on the grid sometimes, or the on the properties for the sorts. If you want to rearrange your columns, you can just click on them and move them on this grid. Okay, so let's take a look here. So we've got a fund here and it's suppressed. So it's not going to show. So I'm not going to suppress that now. And it's a control break. We're going to center it, and then we're going to have fund. Okay. And now let's take a look and see what this report's going to look like. I'm not quite sure why it's saying fund 001-001, you know, because I thought that was the full account code that we had. We just had the fund on there.
Yeah, and even when you go down to Fund 002, it's the same thing. But
Yeah,
I mean, that just actually looks
yeah.
stupid.
If this was a report that I really wanted and I was really going to use this, I would probably send it up to the SSDT and ask them, why is this duplicating the fund number? Because as you can see in our selection here, we don't have fund on here twice. So it should not be on here. All right, let's take out the footer, but I think that's just going to have it on lining up in the whole column on that first column. Oh, there we go. That one worked. Oh, I know why. Because we're we did a page, we did a break on that field. So when you break on that field, it's gonna put it in the column header to begin with, and then we said to put it in the column detail. Okay,
Yeah, there's just so many little things like that that just, it's really hard to put everything together.
right, it is. And it's gonna be hard to, I mean, the only way that you're gonna be good, getting decent or good with report writing is to just do it and just keep messing with it. And like I said before, at least we don't have to start from new. You just grab one of the SSDT reports and make changes to it. Or create something in a grid that you like. And then, let's say, like that 1099 report, we want to put in, we want to run that every year, but we want to put a value in there instead of say hard coding it as greater than, equal to or greater than 600. We can pull that in and actually ask a question when we run a report. Okay. Okay, so we spent some time here on this grid here. Any other questions that have come up that anybody wants to have additional information or anything about this? Because we're going to go on to the configurations next.
We did have, the last final question we had in the chat, Sharon, was, yes, just a reminder that when you make these changes, make sure to save them, save that report. So that's the big deal. If you're going to make any of these changes that Sharon's done, is save it.
Right. So before I go, now the report is actually looking the way I want it to, then I just clicked on save. So now my report definition has been saved with all my changes. If I would go back to the report manager, my sharing cache report will be there, but it's just going to be the initial one because I never clicked saved anytime that we were making any of those changes.
There is another question in the chat, Ms. Sharon.
Hey Sharon, this is Rhonda. I have a question that's really bothered me. You have the sum, the average, but there's no calculate feature. So for example, if you have a percent expended and you're running a BUD sum by fund total and you give it to your board to say, of our general fund, we have spent 68% of our appropriations. There's no calculate function. There's just the sum, the average, the min, and the max. So I don't want it to sum to say, okay, because it'll take that percentage and add every line item in the general fund and add up, and it's like 10,113%. The other in Classic, it used to give you a calculation for like a fund total on a report. And I can't seem to get to figure out how to make that work. Because there is like on a BUD sum, it says percent expended encumbered. Hopefully I'm making sense.
Yes, you are, because I'm thinking one of the fields in the budget accounts is the percent remaining. Fiscal year to date percent expended. Percent expended or encumbered. So when you have your reports like that, if you're pulling out, if you're trying to do what the percent was, because that was actually a stored field in Classic, the percent expended, I would look on those reports that you're trying to do, look to see if there's a percent, like just search for percent in the properties to see if there's a field that you can pull over that will have that, not actually a calculated field of one of these other ones. Does that make sense?
Not really, maybe. I guess I'm just not sure how to do it. I did find there's ODE line number, and then it says percent expended, like it's under that caret. So are you saying
If
that?
it's, yeah, right here. If it's under the caret, that means that this is a field by itself. It doesn't go with ODE line number.
Okay,
If I open this up, then any of these that are underneath there will show. Got a little drag here. All these will go with ODE line number, but not the percent. Okay,
how do I get, do I double click to get it over, or is that something over on the other side when I'm in the selected properties that I need to?
Yes, there's two ways that you can do it. You can click and drag it, or you can double click it. Now, I don't think we're gonna get anything with this. We can try because this is under the budget accounts and we're doing cash account report.
I just happened to, I'm playing along with you. I have like a bud sum that I created for my.
Yeah, so in that bud sum, search for that same field or percent, and it should have it on there.
Because I think when it comes up right now, and that particular one, there's just nothing that's coming in that column. So I've messed with column width, thinking that it wasn't going to be there. I've done all kinds of things and nothing.
If it's coming into your report and it has a column heading, but all the detail in that column is 0, then it's probably the wrong field that you're looking for.
Okay, I'll just reach out to you individually to not. hold
Okay,
this up.
okay.
I think you get what I'm trying to do. It's just not, I've tried a number of ways to get anything to pop up, and I'm just handwriting it on monthly reports for the board.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay. All right, so the
Hey,
next
Sharon?
tab, yes,
Yeah, hey, I was just gonna cover a little bit about the control and detail header for you and explain why the 001 was showing, if you
Go
would
right
like me to. Okay, so the reason that was showing is because in the select properties tab, when you on the fund property, so under that first tab there, you go to select properties.
sorry, okay,
And so you had control break. So you had sort priority on fund and special cost center. So
yes,
if you click on the 3 dots on
Yes.
fund, so go ahead and click on control header only for me, please. And then let's run the report.
okay. Oh, you know what? This was running forever. Let me get back here and remove that one field that we added here. Because it doesn't like that.
Did you have any criteria too? Wasn't sure if you were running it wide open or not.
I'm running it wide open.
Okay.
Sharon, there is a question in the
you-
chat when you guys get done looking at this. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
It's not allowing me to go on. It's like it's still running that report even though I canceled it.
Yeah, so what you could do is go to your 3 dots up in the top left-hand corner there on Google, on Chrome, or
This one,
top right, I'm sorry. Yeah, top right. Go to
Okay.
downloads.
Okay.
Okay, it canceled. So anytime that you have that, anytime you have a report that's taken forever and you want to cancel it, just go to the 3 dots in the top right, go to downloads, and they'll give you an option to cancel it.
Okay,
Okay, so let's go ahead and close that. Let's go ahead and try running it again. That's a new warning. Never seen that before.
I've neither. That's not nice. We're supposed
least
to be
it's green
playing
and not
nice
red.
today. There we go. Okay,
All right, so control header. So control header is the 001. It's the second part of that. So fund 001 is the actual property
Okay.
name. 001 after that is the control header. It just basically puts that property right next to it. So for example, if you set up 2 properties with the same sort priority, so like you had the cash account. So the full account property is the cash account or the fund. So if you have fund and a special cost center next to it, and you want to sort them 1 and 1 to be the same priority, then you could set the special cost center as a control header, and it'll put it right next to the fund on that line, that control header line. Okay, so
Okay.
let's go back let's go back to the fund and let's change it from a control header to a detail header.
Okay,
Let's rerun that report.
we want to do the special cost too.
No, we'll just leave it there. I'm gonna show
Okay.
you how it changes. So then detail header drops it down a line. See how fund 001 is now the third line down?
Yeah,
So it gives you, the control header is that top line, and then the detail header is just a line right below it. So for example, for special cost center, if we would go in and, you know, set that as a 1 and then a control header, then it would put it up next to the fund 001. Or if you want a detail header, it would drop it down a line. So those two headers are actually two different lines.
gotcha.
That's the difference between control header and detail header.
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Casey.
You're
Casey
welcome.
brought up a good point also that I forgot to mention. When you're sorting these, you can have multiple sorts of the same thing. So we're sorting fund and function as priority 1. This doesn't have to be a 1 and a 2. We could sort it as both of them as 1. Okay,
And then
Heidi,
as
you
Heidi
said
was
there's,
saying as Heidi was saying earlier, the control footer will actually place that same property down by the totals line. So,
okay. Heidi, you said there was another question in the chat.
Yeah, Amy Mullenkamp. She says so assuming you're still in this area and you didn't get interrupted or whatever, assuming you're still on this report that you have saved, it says you save the report after you make the changes, then save it again when you make another change. Does it override your original save or does it save as a separate report? So it's a good question.
Yes, that's a great question. It will override the original save. You will only see this report as one time in your report manager under share and cache report. Every time you make a save, it's going to save it as the same report. So everything would be overwritten from what I did before if I save it again. Okay. All right,
caught
so
up.
now,
We're caught
Was
up
it-
on questions. Yep,
Okay.
nope, we're good.
all right. All right, so now we're going to go into the account filters. And the account filters are basically when you run a report, I'm going to go to this generate report, this query option page, all these questions, all these options, that's what the account configure filters come from. So basically, we're just going to set up the report that when you run it, I can answer questions to this, or if you want to run it wide open and you don't care anything about this, then there would be no account filters. Okay. And this is the one place in the SSDT reports that we do most of our changing, because the SSDT, basically when they create the reports, they're going to send it up as one of, meaning that you can enter one account code or one special cost and not a range. Don't ask me why they did that, but most of the SSDT reports are like that. Okay. So when you guys send us help desk tickets and say, hey, I really want to put in a range of fund codes here, or I want to put a range of special costs here. The only thing that we do is we come in here and we copy the report over and we change this to 1 to many or a range or something like that, which I'm going to go over all the different operations that you can do. One thing about the display names though, the display names, you can tell over here on the left-hand side, they're not the same fields as what's on your report. They don't have to be, okay? I can add anything over here that I want to sort or ask questions about for this report, but it does not have to be on the report itself, okay? Like active, that wasn't a column on the report, but I want to make sure that I'm only pulling in active accounts instead of all accounts. The filter name, you know, that maybe we want to put a filter in here that we've created. So we want to add the filter and different things like that. So this page here, or this grid here, can be totally different than what this looks like as far as the properties goes. So the configured filters then, is basically you add what you want to filter on. I only want to see employees that are active or have a birth date higher than such a date or something like that. I want to see if there's anybody that could be retiring and all this kind of stuff. So that's what the configure filters will do, is basically set up that page to ask us something that you can fill in. Okay, so if you look on page 7 of the documentation, there's a list of the different operations and what they do. Okay, so the first one here is equal to. When you use equal to and you put a value over here, okay, that's hard, what we call hard coded into the report. It's not going to ask you what fund you want or account code you want. It's not going to ask anything else. It's just, that's hard coded in the report. So let's say next time you want to run it, the fund equals 006, you'd have to come in here and change this every time you want to run the report, because you have it set as equals to. Okay. The next one is one of. One of allows you to put in multiple values by comma. Okay, so then this one here, we're going to have to put in a parameter, but we'll go into that in a minute. But when you get to the screen to run the report, I can do 001, 006, 009, and so forth. Okay, so I can add a lot of different funds to this report by changing this operation to one of. Okay, not equals to, that's another hard coded. So I'm going to say I want the report to not equal to general funds. So I want all my other funds. It's hard coded in the report. If I want to change it, then I have to come in here and change it in the report definition. Okay. Now the like code is another one that's going to allow you to begin with a certain code. It's not going to allow you to put in a range. It's just one code, but you can use wildcards. So I want all my 500 excuse me, 500 funds. Okay, that's what like would be. But it allows me to put wildcards in here, but only one time. So I couldn't do 500s and 400s and 600s and so forth. Okay, you're stuck to one value there. Okay. Next one is contains. This would be okay. So this would be in this report, then if I use contains, then the value that is in this field, which doesn't make sense here for this example, but if the account full account code, the word school would have to be somewhere in that string, somewhere in that account code. So like if I had description over here and I contained the word school, okay, then any account that has the description of the word school would be in the report. Now, again, that's another thing that's hard coded. Okay, so it's one time only, and then you'd have to go in here and change it anytime you want this value to be changed. Okay. Next one is between. Okay, this would be between two values. So if I was using between, I can put in here account code between 400 and 500. Okay. Actually, I think the between, there's examples on these also in your documentation. Okay, I was right. Only with no, kind of right. With comma. So this would be between 400 and 500. So anything between the fund 400 and 500 would be what would be on here. Okay. Same way with is null or not null. Null is spaces. So anything that's a space or not a space, you could use those two. Greater than or equal to are parameters that you can use, and less than or equal to. Sometimes with the date fields, like on a purchase order report or something like that, and you wanted to put in a range of dates, well, you'll come in here and you'll look at the report and you might see date twice. And that's perfectly fine. So you can have the date field at the top is greater than one date, and then the next one great is less than. So it's basically giving us a range of dates that we can put in. So that's one way you can do the ranges of greater than and less than. Normally, if you're going to do greater than and or less than, then you will have two fields. Okay, so it will be greater than one field, then less than another one. So you'll have two of the same fields here, but they'll both have the same greater than or less than. Okay. The rest of them here, not one of, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's not one of 001. Okay. And the last two that are on here, the sort and type, I have no idea what those are. They're not even in the documentation of any kind of examples or anything from the SSDT. So I'm not really sure what those two do. Okay, so on page 8 of the documentation, sorry, I have to scroll down there and see what page number it is on. In the middle of the page, there's some formats that you need to follow when you're using some of these filters, like when I said something about the dates. If we were doing a greater than and equal date field over here, the format can be month, day, YYY. Or it can be month, day, year. You can put in the date as month, day, year. All the different formats that are listed there are available to be used when you're using this as the values for those. Amount fields, if you're putting in a specific amount in this filter, so if we did equals to, like say 5,000, it can be entered with or without the decimal point. So I can put it in as that or as that. Okay. And then, like I said, there's examples in there about what some of these, how you would actually put those filters in here in the documentation. Now, the one thing that is basically kind of the worst part of this is this field right here, this parameter. Okay. This basically is setting up to show us what we need to enter. And these can be very confusing when you're using them. But let's say I'm going to get rid of that and I'm just going to do fun. And we're going to change this to be one of. So I can put in a list here of funds when I run the report. Okay. So in the documentation, the first part of this, we're going to break this down into sections. So the first thing is parameter. When we're doing one of, when it's not a hard code, so you're not doing equal to something or greater than or less than something, or many or things like that. If it's not hard coded, then you're always going to have a parameter filter here. And the first word always has to be parameter. And one of the other things, like I said, I always like to, my monitor just went out. You guys, there it is. Ooh, scary. One of the things that I always like to do is like, you know, the SSDT's budget summary report asks the same question that I want to ask in this report. I would go to that report, and what I can do is if I left click or right click on this, I can go to duplicate and it will open up another page, another web page right toward the same place that I'm at. So now I have two different places where I'm at the same thing, but I would go back to my report manager and look up that SSDT report, and then I'll do a copy and paste and I'll paste it right back in here. Okay. So I kind of like steal from the SSDT's parameter settings, and then I can go from there. But if it's something that I don't know what to do, or I haven't seen that question asked before, then you'll need to create your own. Okay, so the first part of it is parameter. And then in parentheses is basic, this is a better one down here to look at. Everything in parentheses then is what you need to do. And the first part of it in quotes after your parentheses is basically going to be some type of a name. And this is the name that you want to give it, that you know when you're looking at it what it's asking. Okay, in this case, it's not always this name over here either. It does not have to be your display name. It doesn't have to be your property's name. It can be anything that you want. If this is a date, I could put start date. Then if the next field is an end date, I can name it end date. It could be any name that you want, as long as it's the same, only one name. So within this query, within this report, I can only use filter name once. Okay, and it has to be in quotes. So it's parameters, parentheses, and then in quotes, your field name. So you're just naming it something. And then after the field name, then I have a comma here. Okay, you can look up here at the next one above this, there's 2 commas. So I do active and it's comma, comma. Okay, so the comma, comma is basically the next field is the default value. You don't have to put in a default value. Default value would be if when I want to run this report, something is always going to be in that field every time I pull that report up. Well, I don't want anything in that field, so I'm not going to put anything in here. So I'm going to do a comma and then quote, quote. You can see it a little better up here. I have active and then I have comma, comma. Excuse me, I think I said that wrong. I'm going to do comma, comma, which is an empty field. So I'm not going to put anything in that quote field, in that default field, sorry. So if I see it down here, I have comma, quote, quote, comma. So that's going to, when I run this as a period, it's going to have 2 parentheses or 2 quote marks in that field. Well, I don't want anything in that field, so that's where I'm going to put it in as comma. Okay. The next thing then is the label. The label then is going to be within parentheses. Everything here that we're putting in is within parentheses. And this is the question that's going to be on your report that you want to see. So filter name. So I'm going to put in here, this is going to be, and I'm just going to say filter name. Now, if I wanted to put something in there, like if I go up here to one of these, it's probably, yeah. So this is actually what is displayed on, excuse me, displayed on the field. Fund code, use % for wildcard. Okay, that's actually what's going to be displayed within those quotes on that screen. So we're not going to use this because we changed it as one and only. So I'm going to say fund code, and then I can put separate by, oops, separate by comma. Goodness gracious. Okay, and then my parentheses, because I put that in parentheses, and then my quote at the end. And I always go back, whenever I change one of these, I always go back and say, okay, what did I leave out? All right, so it has to have parentheses at the end because that's the final thing. Okay, so now if I go to generate the report, and if I go to my query options, the fund code has got those quotes in it. And then this is filter name. So I've set it up wrong. Okay. So I want to come back here and I'm going to change this because I have these quotes up here in the fund as a default. I want to get rid of those. Now, why is it putting in the filter name as a default? All right, I'm going to check it one more time and see what it's going to look like. There we go. Fund code filtered by or separated by comma. Doesn't like this filter name for some reason. This might be one of those special, yeah.
Can you say again what, I mean, this seems very in-depth compared to all I want to do is be able to run reports for things that I want. So this filter value that's what's actually pulling the information, or is this
No.
things that are going to be column titles or?
No, the filter value is when you go to run the report, when you go to this query option, it's these questions.
Yeah, which we did have a user chat that question earlier. So that's why Sharon's covering this. So like we had an example, somebody wanted to pull in invoice report by username. I think it was Christy. This is addressing that. She's wanting to take an original SSDT report, but she wants to add an option to it of pulling in by username, or she wants to, for example, Joy, I know you had the question of the between, changing it from between 400 and 500 on some codes. So what Sharon's showing you now is just how to change that report so you can actually drill down and get more what you need. Just to circle back real quick, Sharon, on your deal, if you take out filter name and just leave the 2 quotes in there, I think that's the dealio without. Just leave your quotes in there and just take out filter name, and I think it'll give you what you need.
I'm your, like this.
Do your, yeah, and then do your double quote at the end and then parentheses.
I think I just picked the wrong one. Yeah, that's not right.
Oh, yep, there you go. Okay, all right.
I think I just picked the wrong one to mess with on that one. Oh, crud. I'm hosed up now because of that error.
You should be able to save it still and go back into it. No, it's not going to save it.
But it's not allowing me to go into it. There we go.
There you
Okay.
go. Joy, while she's fixing that, does that help? I mean, what she's covering there, I did not want to roll over your question, but we did have somebody asking about editing these SSDT reports. But yeah, to yours, if you're just wanting to go in and run, you can change some of those. So you can do a range on them, or do the one of, which is the commas in between, or you can even set up a report that you just want to do. I want to run it this way every time and use the equals. Did that help, Joy?
Yeah.
It does. I'm more, when I'm doing this kind of thing, I'm doing it off the grid, and I also find that I can do it through the advanced query part of that.
Right.
So I haven't messed with these, and
Right.
this looks,
And that's what I was going to say too. This can be an additional to whatever you want to run. It can get as really complicated, or you can add different things to this as you want. But like you're saying, that if you're getting what you want from the grid and saving the report and making a few changes to go back in and equal to, then by all means do that, whatever you're comfortable with. But this is just one of the things that allows us to actually go through and make some other changes to it.
yeah, I'd like to be able to do all of that, but from where I'm at right now, that's too big of a step.
Yeah. And that's understandable. We just have some people that want to know how you can make the reports better and bigger and make changes to it and things like that.
Got it.
And things like that. I'm getting rid of this filter because that's not working and it's not allowing me to run it. Okay, so, but one of the main things is that we do get questions on is, I want to run the budget summary and I want to do a range. If that's all you want to do, you can go in here, you can save the SSDT's budget summary report and come in here and change this to one of. And then it's going to allow you to do a range of accounts instead of just one fund or one special cost. If it says like, then that means you're putting in one at a time. So if you want to be able to ask to be able to run this report and put in different parameters, similar to like in Classic, when you went into the Classic reports and you said that you could do this for a range of accounts and things like that, then you can do that also. Okay. All right, so then if I run this for 001 and 006, because that's one of the things I changed, then my cash summary report is only going to have general fund and food service 006. By changing that one parameter in here from like to one of. Okay, now the other thing is, if you don't, if you want to get this and you just want to run it and you know what it's doing, you can change that to like to one of and not even change any of the parameters. Because if you don't change the parameters, it's going to say fund code and it's going to say fund code use percents for wildcards. You don't care what it says. It's still going to run the same way that you changed it to. Even though this is not going to look like the same thing, you could still use it and run it the same way that this SSDT had. Okay, does that make sense then? Okay. And again, then the sort options, when you're running a report, this is going to come from the selected priorities that we had that 1 and 2 on. And like I mentioned before, if you want to sort by something else, you just drag it over. Drag that field over, and then we're sorting by that also. It's like, oh no, I don't want it. You drag it back over. It doesn't matter where they're at over here on the left-hand side. They can be anywhere. These are just the fields that are available for sorting when you run the report. Okay. Now everybody's confused, right? Like I said, this is the most confusing part right here, is setting up these filters. But if you are comfortable with running the reports off the grid with sorts and things like that, by all means, you can still use that. Okay. So the next section then is I'm going to go into the save and recall. Save and recall features are up here at the top when you run a report. Yes.
Before you continue, I put a question in the chat. When you were on the account range in that very confusing section, is there something else that was needed in the filter value, or can we just leave it as is? So if I'd want to run a report for all my 500 and 600 objects, or 600 and 700 objects for like a capital report, do I have to put anything in the filter value there, or do I just let it stay as the default? And as long as I put it as one of, I'm good to go with my commas.
If you're, yeah, if that would be correct. If you're getting the report out by putting in your commas, then that would be okay. You don't have to come in here and mess with this.
So the filter value can just stay the param, parentheses, quote, whatever. I don't have to mess with that at all. Just change the
Right.
operation to one of many. When I go run the report, I can do 6 parentheses or percent, comma, 7%, comma, X, no other comma at the end, I'm sorry. Run the report and I'm going to get all my 600 and 700 objects.
Only if it's one of.
Right.
And when you're doing one of, I don't think you can use wildcards. Let me check here. Yeah, you have, I don't know. I don't think you can use I don't think you can use the wildcards when you do one of, because it's going to look at that percent as that special thing. So we've got two fields here. We've got a like, which is how the SSDT normally sets it up, where you can use wildcards, but you can do like 1%, and that's it. You can't use you can't do multiple funds. Okay. One of allows you to do multiple funds separated by commas, but you can't do wildcards. So if you're doing something that it might fit better to do a range, you know, between, or greater than or less than, I think. Are your accounts that you're looking for like between a certain range? Like if you wanted all your federal funds or something like that?
Yeah, I was just thinking when we used to do GAP at a school that I worked at, I would always run a report for my capital outlay new and capital outlay replacement. So I'd want all my 600 and 700 objects. So, you know, in classic, I would just do 6 asterisk, and then, you know, 7 asterisk. And so I was just wondering if that one of would work in that, but you're saying not with the percent. It's gonna
Right,
be better to do
right.
between
However-
or greater than.
However, there may be another way around this by creating an account folder. You can create account folder under the utilities and name it something like 600 or 700 grant objects or something like that, and put the filter in of asterisks, everything, or leave all the fields blank, but then do a range under the object of 600.799.
I agree. I've mastered account filter for lack of a better word. So yeah, I just didn't think of that. My mind is stuck in
Yeah.
classic where we always put those numbers and, you know, my 600 asterisk, and
Right.
I got my report. So I think it's just thinking of it, just retraining my brain. Thank you.
Right, right. And that's where it gets like, you have to think about this is like, do I want to spend the time creating a report that I can run multiple times, different times by putting in different dimensions here? Or do I want to just create an account filter and use that account filter every time I run a different report? You see what I'm saying? So we could change this and probably put it in here as between but the OP object code between 600 and 700, or do the account filter. You know, that's up to you of how you want to actually do that. When you're talking about reports here and creating the reports, you got to think about it as, okay, is this a report that I'm going to run 50 million times all the time, but I want to be able to put in a range of accounts instead of just one account. Even if I had an account filter, I could do an account filter that would do that same range, but let's say your range changes every time you want to run it. You need to send the cash account for somebody that's doing some grant work or some student activities or something like that. It's going to change every time. Well, you can set up a filter for that and run it off a filter and just use the SSDT reports that are out there. Or I can create my own report by taking the SSDT reports and then just modifying where it's going to ask me what funds do I want to run it for, or what special costs do I want to run it for, you know? So that's just going to determine, it's going to be preference. Do you want to mess with this, or do you want to just do an account filter?
Sharon, something for districts to keep in mind as well when they're doing account filters for grants, making sure you throw the fiscal year. You could put FY22 in there, and then when you get ready to do your FY23, clone those bad boys, rename them to FY23, and all you're doing basically is changing your special cost center and done. Then you've got
Right.
your filters for next year. So, you know, but it's when you're in there, just kind of learning these tricks to save yourself some time.
Right. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pull up a budget summary report here from the SSTT, and we're going to talk now about the save and recall. Okay, the save and recall can be used just for anybody. Let's say I go in here and I run a report for myself for budgets for a specific account filter and things like that all the time. And I want it to be the same options on this query thing. I put the same things in all the time. So what I want to do is I want to do a save and recall. Okay. When you come in here, this is going to say most recent. But if you click on the drop down box, we can set it back to default or we can have a blank. All right. This save and recall is also used with your report bundles, which is what we're going to get into next. So the first thing that you're going to do with report bundles is set up your account filters. Make sure you have filters set up the way you want for the different areas. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to think about, okay, what reports are going to go with this specific report bundle? All right, so let's say I'm working on the high school athletics office. So when I run this budget report, I'm going to say that I want only active reports, and I want the filter name of the one that I created. And I'm going to do high school. And then I want to exclude any accounts that have zeros. Okay. So once I have these parameters set in here, then I go up here and I'm going to name it something. Okay. I can go ahead and generate the report to see that that's what I want to do. It's not going to clear these out because every time I come in here, the default is most recent. So if I run this report now and I exit out, I look at it and I go back in, yeah, that's what I want. All these things are going to stay in here. All right. So then to save these options, I'm going to name this high school. Okay. Once you click off of that name, this is going to highlight and the save is going to be bolded. So now I can go ahead and save it. So now if I do the drop down, that is an option for me. So if I close out of here and then I come back into the budget summary report again, it's back to most recent, but I want to run my high school athletic report. So I can just go ahead and boom and run it. Okay. And let's say I want to show the report options. So whoever's getting this report, when I do my report bundle, I want to go ahead and make sure that they see how that report is ran. So I've made a change to this. So I need to save it again. So I'm going to save it again. So now if I exit out of here and go back into my budget summary report, go to the high school athletics, now that show report options is checked. So anytime you want to make changes to any of these and save them in your save and recall, you want to make sure that you save it after you've made those changes. Okay. You can have multiple save and recalls as you want. I can have a high school athletics. I can have the principal's funds. I can do a student activity accounts, as long as I change these options, change the filters, and then make sure I have a blank line up here and name it something different. Okay. Now, you want to do this for using the report bundles. Okay, this is once these are set up, then we can go ahead and set up some report bundles. And the report bundles are basically the replacement for FISCWeb. The only difference between the report bundles and FISCWeb is they will not go to a website to see the reports. They're going to get the reports emailed to them. And they'll get them emailed to them depending on how often you want the reports to run. Okay. Now, the save and recalls, like we mentioned before earlier, they're based on per person. So if I'm saving save and recalls here and somebody else in the treasurer's office is doing save and recalls, they are not going to be available in the bundles for everybody to see. Whatever I create in save and recalls is what I get to use in the bundles. Okay. So that is why one of the things that we talked about, and we have actually ran this past the auditors, our SOC audit, to make sure that it's okay, is setting up a user for you that is basically a fiscal reports user. And that user will only have access to running and creating reports and doing account filters. That's the only access that that report has. We'll set it up and we'll give the username and password to the treasurer. And then whoever that person wants to give that access to create and maintain the reports bundles, then they can do that. It's up to the district then to decide who all gets that username and password. And then if that person happens to leave, then there is no problem with saying, oh my goodness, Sally over here did all our reports bundles and she retired. We forgot that she did the reports bundles. We can't get into her accounts anymore. So we have to start over with our reports bundles. Or you contact us and we're going to have to reset our password and get somebody in there so they can do copy and pasting and all that kind of stuff. So it's basically setting something up all over again in a reports bundles. Okay. So if you're interested in having that set up, just send us a help desk ticket and we'll get that user set up for you. Okay, so I've gone through and I've created some of my filters and I've gone through and I did a save and recall on some of my reports. So the next step then is we're actually going to create a reports bundle. Okay, and the reports bundle then is on the bottom of page 10. We need to go up into reports and go into reports bundle. So it's basically a two-step process. Is we're going to set up the report bundle and then we have to schedule the report bundle. Okay. I'm going to get rid of this because that's the one I was going to work on. Okay. So once you're in here, you're going to see some of these report bundles and they're by the SSDT, but you'll notice that you don't have access to doing anything other than you might have access. No, I don't think you do. To the audit report, if you might have the group manager access, but you don't have access to make changes to these or delete them. Okay, you'll have access to making changes to and deleting the ones that you create and the ones that you create only. Okay, so basically this is the area then that we're going to think about is like, okay, so this report bundle is going to could have multiple reports going to multiple people at certain times of the month or certain times of the week or certain times of the year, whatever you want to set it up to be. Okay, FISC Club ran nightly. Okay, you might not want to run these and send them to everybody nightly. You can send them to somebody at the end of the week or on Monday morning or whatever. It's totally up to you. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is give it a name, and it could be any name you want. Each name has to be different. So if I made a high school central reports or something like that, and my next one I went in and I named it the same thing, you'd get an error. They have to be unique. Okay, then a description of this, and then I'm just going to say these are the principal. Okay, now the tags, I'm trying to see if I can move this window, but I can't. The tags over here on the right-hand side. The tags is just something that you can enter on here if you want to be able to sort or to find your report bundles by the tags. If you don't want to, you don't have to put any tags in them. Okay. So then the next section here is actually creating what reports do you want to be sent to this group. Okay, if we do a drop-down box, then it's going to have all of our reports that are in here that are available from the reports manager. All right, so the first report here, you can also type, I think you can do a budget, yeah, budget summary report. So the one that I did was the SSDT's budget summary report. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And then down here, once I select that, you'll see that I have these are my save and recalls. So if I had multiple save and recalls in this one report, they would all be listed here. So this is my high school central reports. So this high school filter, or the one that I set up, is the one I'm going to add. So I click on the add and it adds it to the bottom down here. Okay. This little pencil right here allows me to change that report definition. So if there's anything that I want to change in it, it opens up this box and it allows me to make any changes. I can verify that it's okay. I could actually generate the report and things like this and make those changes. Once I make a change here, if I hit on continue, then it's going to save those changes in my save and recall as well. Okay. Let's say if I want to do a cash report also. Cash summary report. So I'm going to open that up. And then I did not do a save and recall in the cash summary. So the only thing that's in there is the most recent options that I ran the cash summary report or the default options. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it here for the default options. Okay. And let's say I wanted an outstanding purchase order report. You see how it's all these, if you have save and recalls and all of them, they'll be listed here, and then you just add it to the list down here. The reports that are down at the bottom are the ones that are going to be created and put into your reports bundle. Once I have all my reports down here that I actually want to send, then I can do a save. So I'm going to save that. And then back here in the background, you're going to see then I have a reports bundle here, high school central reports and the principal reports for the week. It's been created. We have not scheduled it for anything. Okay. At this time, I can create another one and do the activity accounts or something, other ones, whatever one your FISWeb reports have been used for, then you can just keep on creating them and make a whole bunch of bundles here. Okay. Then the next thing that I do once I have it created is I'm going to schedule that. Okay. Now we're going to schedule it by going into this little hourglass or the clock here, and that's going to schedule this bundle. There's different things that you can do. And one of the things that we're going to suggest that you do at first is to run it immediately. Okay. If you click on this to run immediately, and then your email address, don't put anybody else's email address, just your email address. And then the last thing is here is how you want the email to go. Do you want it to be multiple notifications? So like if you had 5 reports in this report bundle, that person's going to get 5 emails. Or do you want a single notification with 5 reports attached to it? Okay. I don't think this is going to work because I don't think it's set up in these test files, but we can try it. Okay. So then I'm going to go ahead and click and save. So that fires off that job, and then I should get an email with all those reports attached. Once it works and you get the email, then you can go back in here and we're going to schedule it for real. But that's one of the things that we would suggest that you do first, just to make sure that your bundles are working correctly. All right. You can set it up as an event also. Like you want it to go every time. I wonder if I can do a find on here. Every time you close the month. Oops, I just missed it. Posting period. Let's reopen, open. Was there closed?
Hey, Sharon, if you start typing like posting or period up there in the bar,
Okay.
it'll start picking it up.
And you'll want the one that says completed. That's the one when they close.
Yeah, this
up
one here at
there.
the top.
There you go. Yep.
Not that one, this one.
On posting period completed.
Post.
See
Yep. There you go.
Yep.
Not disbursement.
Yep.
Posted period completed.
The one that
That
says
one?
completed
Go up.
event. Yep. There,
Yeah,
that
right
one.
there.
Okay. So what that will do then is every time you close a month, it's going to fire out these reports and send the email to whoever you have it to. So that's that one way you can do it. The other one is a cron. And everybody's like, what the heck is a cron? I couldn't tell you what a cron is, but all I know is you use it to schedule. In the documentation, there is a website that this cron expression generator is. Okay. And I've got some examples in there of how to use this. So if you just go to that website and you say, okay, I want to send this report on its specific day, and I want to send it on Monday, I can actually choose which specific day of the month it is, if it is a certain time on Mondays or whatever. But you just click on what you want, and it's going to create this cron expression down here at the bottom, resulting cron expression. If I did it on Monday and Tuesday, or if I want to do it on Monday and Friday. You see how this cron expression is changing? So then once I have it the way I want it, I can do a copy and then paste that into this cron expression. Okay. So that's how you create the cron expressions. Go to that website, put in when you want these reports processed, and then copy and paste what the results are. The next thing then is putting in email addresses of who you want to get these reports from too. So we're going to send these to myself. And then a comma, unless I want to send it to Heidi. And then keep adding as many emails as you want. Okay. And then again, the archive type, I just want them to get one email with multiple attachments to for each of the reports that are in this report bundle. And then I'm going to save it. Now, one of the things that once you schedule a job, if I go back in here to try and make changes to this, I can change the different things here. But I'm not sure if it actually, if you go under utilities and job scheduler, then here's my jobs that I have running. Okay. Yep, I had one that was rejected. This is the one that I sent to myself because we don't have this set up to actually run. So I'm going to get rid of that job. This is the report bundle that I have running. If I scroll over, it's pending. And then the next run time is 4/22, which is Friday. So it's going to run it at Friday at midnight. Okay, so you can always come in here and check to see the status, to see if it actually ran. If somebody calls and said, I didn't get my reports, come here first and look to see if it failed or if it completed. If it completed, I'm trying to think here if it has email addresses in here that it sent it to. I'm not sure if you can actually see what the email addresses are that it actually sent to. I don't think you will. But anyway, there's a way there. Then you can come here to see if it actually ran. If they say that they didn't get their reports, you can come back here to the report bundles and then do this again to schedule it and do it immediately to that person's email. Say, I'm going to send the reports to you again right now, check it and then see if you get them. Okay. The other thing is if they're saying that they're not getting it and it might be going into their spam or junk mail, need to check this email configuration because it's going to come from Postmaster. They might not know that's who it is from. So if this needs to be changed, we can change it to an email address. So when they get the email, it's coming from a real email address, not the Postmaster. So we can actually get in here and change this for you if that's the case. Okay. All right, so that is basically all that we were going to cover today. I know it's a lot. I tried to not get too confusing. Hopefully you got some benefit out of it. Are there any questions or anything that anybody has that have not been addressed?
I'm not seeing any in the chat that haven't been addressed, Sharon, unless somebody has one that they'd like to unmute themselves.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm not sure it belongs in this forum, but on the grid where it's got the grid result amounts there, and it always is at 500, but you can move it over to 2000 or whatever. Can you explain that to me? If I've only got it at 500 and what I put in there turns out it'll give me 700 results, am I not getting 200 of the results then?
She's sharing her screen, Joy. We'll
Got
take a peek at that. Yeah, so the reason, while she's pulling that up, the reason the DT did that was performance, because obviously, as we've all experienced, right? That thing is lazy loaded, so it's coming in to increase the performance in that grid. So yes, if you indeed do, this is my understanding, so one of my team, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is yes, if you have 700 and that's filtered to 500, you're only seeing 500 of those values. So
Right.
yeah, I'm getting head shaken from the rest of my team. So it is limiting the grid for performance. So if you're doing something specific like that, now again, that's just the view here. If you're going to run that report through an actual report, it's going to pull in more. However, if this grid is set to 500 and you're doing a report from the grid, you could be missing data from there. Okay,
Okay,
because the reports are pulling just from the grid.
And how does it determine? Is that by date? So the oldest stuff isn't there, or
It's
what's
going to, yeah, right. It's going to be 500 rows. So if you filter by date, like do ascending or descending, it's going to pull in what you have filtered by in that grid.
okay?
It's a view.
And then sometimes I get excessive query cost detected. Does that mean I don't have that slide over far enough?
That actually, and I'm going to rely on my team for some of this, Sharon and Casey, and it specifically, that could be one, you have columns in there that's something, even though you have
many
these columns in, right, too many columns, or you've removed a column that a piece of information could be dependent on within that grid as well. So you could have a couple relying features on that. So the best thing to do in that is to reset, or maybe even try moving your columns around. But as Sharon said, it is very possible to have too many columns in here.
Okay,
That would be the first thing that I would do. If you're getting the excessive query, would be to reset it to be the default right here, and then go into the more and remove a lot of things like why they have last login, account information, account expired. You know, those things are the user's account information. Why do you want to see that on the activity ledger? You know, so anything that has to do with the user, I'm getting rid of. So I'm not going to put those on there. So that's going to remove some of those fields, and it might help with the excessive query.
all right.
I have a question, Sharon.
Yes,
Can you go back to report bundles?
sure.
The last box with the check mark, I know that means active versus not active.
Yes.
I have a lot of report bundles, and if I close the month and all those reports go out, and then I decide I want to open the month back up, I have to go down through there individually and check each box to make them inactive. And then after I close again, make them active so the reports don't go out again.
You're
I
talking
thought-
about the report bundles that you have created, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Why can't they put a box at the top to select all or not select all?
That's a great question. That's something that we can add to see if it can be added. I'm pretty sure that their thoughts didn't include that type of a thinking process, that a lot of report bundles would be processed on the close of the month, in addition to the SSTT monthly reports. But evidently users want that also. So yeah, we can see if there can be a button at the top here put to uncheck and check all.
Sharon, I'd added it to the chat, but I'm not sure Rodney saw my reply to it. It's already an enhancement that is out there with the SSDT, but since it's been brought up again today, I'll go ahead and add that to our wish list that I'm sending up to them, where they can do that. I know that there is an enhancement out there existing for that already. And two, remembering that when report bundles were first brought up, you couldn't do by event immediately too. So it's that
Right.
event feature is what's now the hiccup and the giddy up, and why we need that. So I'll make sure to include that on my wish list that I'm sending up to them.
So that is not something that I had originally thought of, was if we do have to reopen a month and then at the close, is that is always going to regenerate those reports for anybody that we have those bundles going to. So to avoid that, we would be safer to select a date.
That's true.
Okay.
You would select by date. It could be close to your closeout date, but it might not always be your closeout date. If you schedule the reports to run at the 30th of the month or the last day of the month, I think that's one of the options. You can do the last day of the month. You might not be closed that day, but you might stop processing that day. So you can stop processing and say, no more POs for that date and things like that. So those types of reports would have the information. The only thing that I'm thinking of is maybe like when you're balancing and you're posting interest and things like that, that might not be included in some of those reports that go out before you actually close the month. Okay, any other questions? If not, anything from the team? Okay, we appreciate everybody for being here this morning, and this recording will be put out there as quick as we can get it. If everything hasn't, if technology is on our side, we'll get it out there as soon as we can. And if anybody has any report problems, questions, please feel free to put a help desk ticket in to fiscalhelp@metasolutions.net. I think it's redesign.help, isn't it? It's changed. I don't know. Redesign.help@metasolutions.net.
Redesign help at metasolutions.net.
There you go.
Sharon's tapping out.
I'm tapping out. I need more caffeine, I think. All right, everybody have a great day.